Well, Oak Ridge was born by the Manhattan Project, and so this is a living history of Oak Ridge and what Oak Ridge did then and what Oak Ridge is doing today.
What was it like to live here in Oak Ridge? What did you do? Well, we did like everybody else, but it was still within this very secret environment to convey that story of what it was like to live here, not only just the technical side of what we did here.
And showing people some of these sites where such important work was done, conditions that were highly secretive.
And I don't think you can find anybody better anywhere to do what they do, to tell the story of Oak Ridge, the past and the present. All of them have unique ideals and unique experiences within the plants and Oak Ridge where they've lived and breathed. And they share that and bring you down that path with them when they're telling the story.
Now, we have people here as volunteers who worked as scientists and engineers, but we also have people who worked here who really didn't have that much background about Oak Ridge until they moved here.
The volunteer role, if it works, is to engage with them. And engage with them however that volunteer is comfortable engaging with them. There's no one way for a volunteer to do it.
They're really ready to share that with everybody else, and the enthusiasm that they bring with it is just unbelievable.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll ask a question and then it'll lead to a conversation, usually on a more private scale rather than a group scale. And you can tell they're really getting into wanting to learn more.
We have adults come in, some who barely remember their high school chemistry, and as I said, we have others that are trained with advanced degrees in science and engineering and so forth. So we have a whole spectrum, and as a volunteer we need to be able to communicate with each of those people and on their level.
I think volunteers, particularly those who have got family connections or have heard enough stories from friends and neighbors and family that they can relate these stories, particularly to the young people. That's one of the values I think that where volunteers can really bring history alive.
Well, I think the museum does a good job of picking up the origins in the Manhattan Project, not exclusively dwelling on them, but using them to set the stage to tell the story of Oak Ridge into the present.
It's a picture today of what has gone on in the past by so many people, so many different backgrounds, for so many different reasons.
And you can't find that information in a textbook. I mean, in a small textbook, but you can come here and in 2 hours you can walk through this museum and understand what happened in the 1940s and what's happening today.
One fellow once said, "Can't you just say, and then they did isotopes?" Well, they do isotopes. They do important isotopes. Plutonium-238 is an isotope we use neutrons today to produce, not for weapons, that's 239, but to power spacecraft. Anything that goes past Mars depends on plutonium-238, made at Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
We have a very deep role here in NASA and the future of NASA as far as producing the fuel for satellites. And of course our NASA background goes all the way back to the very beginning.
We want to get out as much science and history as possible. We want to get people really interested.
And you can see that happen sometime in people's faces as they realize, oh, this is what happened, or they came together and did this, and all these amazing scientists cooperated and worked on this project, and look what the results were, and look how many lives were saved. It's awesome.
When either children or grandchildren of the people who worked in Oak Ridge during the war come in And they have a question that they've just been dying to ask somebody for years. They said, my daddy worked, I think, at a place called Y12. And there's something we don't understand. Here's our question. All of his pay stubs were written by the Kodak company. How could that be? And I said, oh, that's real simple. Really? I said, the Y12 plant during the war was operated and managed by Eastman Kodak out of Kingsport, Tennessee. And so all their checks were run through the Kodak, clearinghouse or the payroll system. It just lit them up. The woman, I remember, I think it was her daddy, and she just, oh my goodness, we didn't know that.
But you go from the Manhattan Project display here, where it's a wartime facility producing plutonium using this new thing called a pile, what we would now call a reactor, to generate neutrons to produce a plutonium isotope. But those same neutrons are useful for research. And so you go over there, and there's a letter on the wall dated May 1944, may we please start using those neutrons for research, and in particular demonstrating neutron scattering. And it segues into the displays that we have on the high flux isotope reactor and the spallation neutron source as we continue to do research with neutrons today.
I think Oak Ridge was always about trying to look out into the future. And I think the museums, the bus tours, and all that do the same thing now. We're looking to the future. We're looking to better it, to make it a better place for everyone. And we have the scientists and things here in Oak Ridge. It's unbelievable some of the things that they do at these plants. And there's just so much, to share and tell. And that's one of the things we like to do here and on the bus tours.
If there's a way that we can share that information, if you can push the right buttons and find us at the right time, I think that's something that the volunteers can bring to a museum, any museum in fact.
They loved what they did, they believed in what they did, and they believed in what Oak Ridge as a whole did to help in the war. And they're proud of it, and they want to share that experience and how hard it was, what they had to go through to do it, the difficulties they faced, and the idea that they kept all this secret is almost something that you can't believe. And we're still right out there on the cutting edge with everybody else here in Oak Ridge.
Enable them to walk away here with a much more informed role of what happened here over all these years.
This is probably the most enjoyable job I've ever had. These are not just volunteers, they're lifelong friends that I didn't have the opportunity to know before. But I have fell in love with each and every one of them. They all have something to offer greatly to Oak Ridge and the museums and the bus tours.
It's so good to see school groups come through here, and the history that they learn is so important. I think it's very valuable to this community.
So whatever people are interested in, whether it's the Manhattan Project, whether it's defense, whether it's remediation, or what I really enjoy, whether it's the science of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, are all displayed here.
Exhibits by our state-of-the-art. And I think that just about anybody can find something in here to interest them or to tweak their imagination or to get them to tell other people to come and visit the museum.
And then they look in and they see all this stuff and they go, wow! When we have the school groups go out, I like to stand at the door and wave at all of them as they pass out. Did you have fun? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Particularly when they get over here starting to play with the energy systems, and they start slow and then they get fired up.
And then we can tell them some of the things perhaps that the general public doesn't know or that you wouldn't get in a school setting.
This museum is state of the art. And so they kind of come away, I think, with I think you blow them away in here.
But we still have a lot of volunteers that lived all of this history, worked these plants and knew everything that was going on and the secrecy of everything. It's amazing some of the stories that they can tell that you couldn't believe it unless you heard it from them, and they're ones that lived it. Their main goal is to see somebody really enjoy what they always enjoyed, and they impart that, you know, to our visitors and to our bus tours, and we're more than blessed to have these kind of volunteers. They're just the heart of the museum and the bus tours as far as I'm concerned.